All right, let's just jump right in. We are going to tackle one of the most interesting and honestly provocative questions in environmental science right now. Can cows, the very animals we often blame for climate change, actually be the key to saving the planet?
It sounds like a total paradox, doesn't it? I mean, we're constantly hearing about the massive environmental footprint of livestock, but there's this growing movement that's taking that whole idea and flipping it completely on its head. So here's the core claim, and it's a big one. By radically changing how we manage grazing animals, we can turn them from an environmental liability into, well, a powerful tool for actually regenerating our soils and healing our ecosystems. But, and this is a big but, this is not a settled issue, not even close. It is a fierce debate full of passionate advocates on one side and some very serious scientific skepticism on the other. So today, let's unpack both sides of this fascinating story.
First things first, we've got to set the stage. To even begin to understand the proposed solution, we need to get a really clear picture of the problem that pretty much everyone agrees on. What is agriculture's real impact on the planet? So let's talk scale, because the numbers here are pretty staggering. The data is clear. Our global food system is responsible for about a quarter of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. And check this out. Livestock alone accounts for a whopping 14.5% of that. That, right there, is the core of the problem we're trying to figure out. And you know, it goes way beyond just emissions. The way we've been doing intensive agriculture for the last century or so has had these huge cascading consequences, from literally stripping our topsoil of life to polluting our rivers and streams and dramatically reducing the diversity of plants and animals out there. And this is the question that changes the entire conversation. Because the proponents of regenerative grazing argue that the problem isn't the cow itself, the problem is how we've been managing the cow. So let's dig into the regenerative idea. At its heart, it's a philosophy that asks us to look back, to look at how nature worked for thousands, even millions of years, long before we had modern fences and feedlots. This idea was really pioneered by a biologist named Alan Savory. While he was working in his native southern Africa, he noticed something profound. He saw that the health of the grasslands seemed to get worse when the large, wild herds of animals were removed. He had this epiphany. The land and the animals didn't just coexist, they evolved together as one single system. And that insight leads us right to the core practice, which is also called holistic management. The whole strategy is to bunch livestock together in these dense herds, kind of like they would in the wild to protect themselves from predators, and move them around frequently. So they'll graze one small area intensely for a very short time, trampling all that organic matter into the ground. And then you move them off and let that land rest and recover for a long, long time. And listen, this is so much more than just moving cows around a field. It's a really comprehensive framework. You can see from these steps, it forces a farmer or a rancher to define their entire system, not just the land, but their family, their community. Then you have to set clear goals, constantly monitor the health of the ecosystem, and here's the key part, look at step 5. Every single decision has to be tested against social, environmental, and financial criteria. It's all about being holistic and adapting constantly. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now, let's get to the exciting part, the promise. Because the claims made by the people who practice this, they are nothing short of revolutionary. And this number really gets to the heart of it. The theory is that this intense grazing, where the grass is quickly chomped down, it stimulates the plant to grow more roots, deeper into the earth. So think of it like this. That intense pruning from the herd forces the plant to pump more liquid carbon down into its root system to fuel regrowth. It's effectively pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and burying it deep in the soil. And in this one study in Texas, they found that this method sequestered an extra 3 tons of carbon per hectare per year. That's a huge deal. The crucial point here is that the benefits they talk about go way beyond just carbon. It's really pitched as this triple win. Ecologically, you get healthier soil that acts like a sponge for water and supports more biodiversity. Economically, farmers report spending less on things like feed and vet bills. And socially, it can just be a more fulfilling, engaging way to farm. But this is the quote that really lit the fire under this whole debate. In his viral 2013 TED Talk, Alan Savory made the ultimate promise that this method could be a primary tool to actually reverse climate change. And that one statement, well, it brought the idea to the world stage, and with that fame came some really intense scrutiny. Which brings us right to the heart of the conflict. Because when you make a claim that big, you'd better have some extraordinary evidence to back it up. So what does the wider scientific community have to say about all this? Well, the scientific community's biggest issue is with that huge carbon claim. Critics fired back almost immediately. For instance, one major analysis concluded that the real potential for carbon sequestration is actually about 7 times lower than what Savory was claiming. And they point out a massive hole in the argument. The claims often downplay or even ignore the powerful greenhouse gas methane, which, is naturally emitted by the cattle themselves. You can't just forget about the methane. And the critiques are pretty broad and well documented. On the practical side, this is an incredibly complex system to manage. It requires a big upfront investment in things like fencing and water systems. Then, on the scientific side, many researchers argue that the success stories you hear are mostly anecdotal, and that a lot of the controlled scientific experiments just don't show a consistent benefit over simpler, old-school continuous grazing.
On top of that, there's a key economic argument against it. The thinking goes that by forcing an animal to eat everything in a small paddock, instead of letting it pick and choose the most nutritious plants, you can actually reduce their individual weight gain. Some studies even suggest that less intensive, continuous grazing can end up being more profitable, especially when you factor in all the extra labor and infrastructure costs of the regenerative model.
So where does that leave us? We've got this incredible miracle cure on one side, and what some call a dangerous myth on the other. As you've probably guessed, the truth is likely somewhere in that messy middle.
The reality is, there's no simple verdict here. Asking, does regenerative grazing work, is a bit like asking, does medicine work? Well, it depends. It depends entirely on the specific application, the skill of the person administering it, and the whole context surrounding it.
So what's the really crucial takeaway from all of this? It seems like success isn't guaranteed by the system itself, but by the skill of the manager. What works wonders in a dry Texas rangeland might totally fail in a wet pasture in Vermont. And a lot of the scientific studies are pretty short-term, just a few years, while building healthy soil can take decades. This creates this constant tension between the lived experience of ranchers who see results over time and the data from controlled experiments.
And that really leaves us with a final, critical question about the future of food. Is our goal to find one single, scalable silver bullet that works everywhere? Or is it to build a whole toolbox of diverse solutions that are tailored to specific people and specific landscapes? This whole debate suggests the real challenge isn't just about soil science. It's about changing how we think about farming, innovation, and policy itself.